What is going to make you a happier and more joyful person is attaching a different meaning to the events that happen in your life. People who end up getting, an undesirable outcome, but have joy are people who look at it and frame it in a way that creates a meaning that, hey, this is happening for me. Welcome to the Dwayne Kerrigan podcast, and I'm your host, Dwayne Kerrigan. With 35 years in business and close to 30 ventures across 12 industries, I've seen a lot. Amid the celebrity allure of entrepreneurship, many exceptional entrepreneurs remain shadowed. Here, I team up with these hidden talents to unveil their challenges and successes. Dive in with me to unearth entrepreneurial gems, learn from our experiences, and get educated.
All right, we're going to get started. Sorry for the delay. We had some technical difficulties with the mic that I'm wearing, and to be expected, I guess. This is our first time doing this. We're recording for the podcast. We want to thank everybody who has come on today. Welcome. Thank you. My mother would be extremely proud of my handwriting on the board. Thank you for your trust, your confidence, and hopefully you get an extreme amount of value from this. This is a trial session for something that we're doing for the podcast and for a teachable moment with our listeners, with you guys. And so thank you very, very much to everybody who's attended, both invited guests and listeners that are on the podcast. So we had a lot of questions come in. As a matter of fact, we had 51 questions, which is about 10 times more than I actually thought we would get. And so thank you for that. But two of the most glaring pieces that we got, we recorded all the questions here. The biggest questions revolved around problem solving and decision making and leadership. And so I'm going to do a little teaching content. So without further ado, here we're going to just kind of get started. And so some of the biggest things that kind of popped up with the questions that came in, and actually, I'll just kind of throw my glasses on and just review a couple of them. How can someone learn to make stronger, more confident decisions, especially under pressure or high stress situations? When facing tough strategic decisions, how do you determine when to rely on data, intuition, advice from others? How do you maintain a long-term strategic vision while ensuring daily operation decisions remained aligned with vision? So those are like three of the first three questions that kind of we logged down. And so just to give you context about what we're going to teach today is first we're going to talk about problems. What do we do with problems? I think the first thing that we do with problems, what happens with many of us, I know it happens with me. It was something that I struggled with in the very beginning. Was I would have a problem in my business or my life or my family or whatever it was. And what I would do is focus on the problem. I would focus on the problem in a way that I would regurgitate the problem over and over again. For example, if it's in your business, I can't find good employees. It's like, when I, continually state that problem over and over and over again, that problem has a tendency to grow. There's three pillars of progress. I learned this from Tony Robbins. There's three pillars of progress. Number one, see it as it is, not worse than it is. Number two, see it the way you want it. And then number three is make it that way, and AKA take action. And so oftentimes when we regurgitate a thought or a problem that has negative connotations, it will grow. Anything that you feed energy to is going to grow. So when you regurgitate this problem, that becomes a problem in its own. And so the first step that we want to do is we want to state the problem in solvable terms. So instead of revolving the problem over and over and over again, I can't find good staff, whatever that looks like, we want to turn it into a question. One of my favorite questions, for those of you that have, been around me a lot, is what's the upside and what's the downside, and I live with the downside. So that is for sure a big thing. There's also three levels to a problem. There's the external or tangible, and I'll just use like a pretty simple example. I'm old. I'm 55. I remember days when I used to go to the bank to do my banking with the business and all that kind of stuff. And so, you walk into the bank and, there's a big lineup and it's like, oh my God, there's a line. I'm busy. And the lineup is an external problem. The next level is the internal problem. So the internal problem is the emotion, where we internalize the problem and it creates emotion because we've attached a meaning to whatever that problem is. And so, for example, it's like, well, this is an inconvenience, so I'm frustrated. Or I've got to go and I'm going to be late for picking up my child from daycare or from school, and now I'm peeved off and angry. There was, I'm supposed to be at my workout class and I'm missing an opportunity to be healthy. And that's, a letdown or whatever that is. So we bring the problem in internally and it creates an emotion, fear, anger, depression, sadness. Most times when it's a problem, it's not happiness, joy, or wonderment. And then the third level of the problem is the physiological problem, psychological problem, which on the psychological side of the problem is we create an extended meaning and 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 we factor a level of justice to that problem or injustice to the problem. So, for example, at the higher level, where if you were supposed to pick up your son or your daughter from school and they're 5 years old and they're waiting at a daycare, and if you put yourself into that position where it's like, oh my God, I'm gonna have to fight traffic. I gotta get going. Da 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 da. This stupid bank. This is unjust. They make so much money. Their profits are X amount every year. Why don't they just have staff? And now we've attached this, psychological injustice to a problem. And so how we weight that, whether it's external, internal, or psychological, is a really, really important piece of how we react to the problem, both inwardly and outwardly. And I think too, going back to the three pillars of progress, it's like, well, let's just see it as it is, not worse than it is. People kind of put in questions about making decisions. When they have a problem, when they have a situation at work, at home, whatever that, in the community, in your church, how do we make effective decisions? When's the right time? What are the considerations that we have to take into effect? And so I just wanted to kind of cover the first part of what I think happens is that when people struggle to make decisions, it's because they're not making the struggle. The struggle is not making the decision. Making the decision, once you've made a decision, there's actually freedom in making decision. And there's power in the ability to move forward from being stuck where you are to making movement forward to where you want to be. And so I would just say that there's four reasons why people don't make decisions. The first reason is fear. The fear of failure, the fear of making a mistake, the fear of a repercussion from your boss, from your husband, from your child, from your school, your teacher, whatever that looks like. The second piece is uncertainty. We sit in a place of uncertainty, and that uncertainty becomes a trap because all growth happens outside of your comfort zone. And so this freezing of uncertainty can become part of our DNA. It becomes part of our personality. Um, and it also attaches to fear. This whole fear and uncertainty tie into, well, if I'm not enough, then, and my decision isn't right, I'm not enough. And if I'm not enough, I won't be loved or I won't be respected. I think the other piece too is that decision making is a muscle. It's a muscle and it's a skill set. And oftentimes where we struggle is this area of making the tough and difficult decisions. But if we have not developed that muscle over time, where we practice making decisions through a process and developing a process, which I will talk about later, but as we create a, a, a process to make the simple decisions or the easier, smaller decisions. And what happens is that we take the small decisions for granted. Um, we we don't create a ritual or a process to do the things that are smaller, so that when we have a bigger decision, we haven't created or developed that muscle in order to be able to walk through a ritualized process that we use. So the question that I have for you, if you struggle with making big decisions, the question that I have for you is, what is your process? What is your ritual for making the small decisions? If you do not have a ritual, if you do not have a process, I promise you, you are going to struggle with the bigger decisions. And that to me is probably one of the most common themes. Um, and then I would say overwhelm. The fourth piece is overwhelm. Is we get our emotions amped up because we create meaning around making difficult decisions. We role play. I don't know if you have had the same experience, but about 96 or 97% of the problems that I ever had actually never came to fruition. I mean, I create these things in my head going, oh my God, what's he going to say? What is she going to say? How am I going to do this? What's going to happen? And we future plan out things that never ever actually happen. And this, I think, is, relates to a really good skill that a lot of us can benefit from by learning to live in the present, asking yourself, like, what does this really mean? Well, in the end, in 20 years from now, is this really going to make the difference? Am I over exaggerating the possibility of what might happen based on this decision I make, that in actual fact, a year from now, it's not really going to matter? And I don't mean to underscore, but what I really want to do is be able to put into perspective the size of the problems that we actually have. And so that is that I think is a huge piece of us managing our overwhelm. What again are the routine or the processes or the questions that you ask yourself in order to bring down overwhelm? For me, I'll share a few things. For me, when I start to feel overwhelmed, I've kind of realized that, first of all, I believe that overwhelm starts physiologically in the body. And so I identified that much of my physiology, when I start to feel overwhelmed, I feel it in my chest. It comes from my upper body and it blows out towards a target. And so I can feel like it's just kind of coming up and it rolls out. And so one of the things that I try to do, and I'm not successful all the time or near all the time at this, but it is about identifying. It's about a process of just learning and exploring who we are and how we become better. And so as I start to feel it, then there's a process that I start to do. So the first process is I'll take a deep breath. And sometimes, like, we'll be driving in the car and I'll just be thinking, right? I'm constantly thinking. My wife will tell you, I'll be driving the car, we'll be driving somewhere, and my mouth is moving like a mile a minute. And she looks at me and she says, "Boy, I really wish I was a part of that conversation." and so I'm always thinking, and as I'm thinking, it actually comes out of my mouth. And so sometimes I'm thinking about, my problems or the things that I have to tackle. And as I'm thinking about them, I can feel it kind of pushing up. And so some people, maybe it's in your hands, maybe it's in your shoulders, maybe it's in your neck, your headaches, you just have to find that physiological trigger and find a way to release that. And then the other is that I ask, one of the key questions I ask is, what does this mean? Or I'll ask, is this true? Is this true? Is it really true? Is this really as big as I think it might be? Maybe this person meant something else. What if it was not true and I'm creating something in my mind? And those kinds of questions help me through. So that's my ritual. First is breathing, and then there are a series of questions depending on what the situation is. And I practice it over and over and over again. And the reality is what you practice in the silence or darkness or the quiet times of your home or your office when the door is closed, what you ritualize and practice in private is rewarded in public. And so the best leaders are the leaders that are going and creating these rituals back, in a quiet moment or a quiet time, and they're building those muscles so that when they get into a situation of urgency or frustration or emergency, they show up in a way where you go, wow, that person really handles themselves well.
So I think that this is a big piece that I want to address, which is in the three decisions that we are always making is what am I focusing on? So we are always focusing on something. In order for us to execute on any activity, whether it's taking a drink, blowing your nose, in a work environment, whatever it is, you have got to ask yourself a question in order to be able to move forward at a task or take any type of action. So you're always asking yourselves a question. Do I need a drink of water? Do I need to blow my nose? Should I talk to this person? Should I address this? Should I coach this person on this thing? Should I, whatever? Should I put my blinker on in the car? Like it's constant. The mind is always constant. In our subconscious, we are always focusing on everything. And one of the pieces actually, as I say that, our brain is a 2 million year old brain. And it's only really been in the last couple of 100 years that as a human species, we have actually been able to live in a way that we are not in fear on a regular basis. But if you are in a room of 1,000 people and you ask the question, when was the last time? And so we'll ask this question, and you can ask yourself, when was the last time that you felt unsafe? In your life? And many men will answer that question, it's been a long, long time. Many women who have had to walk through a parking lot or near a park or go walk in the dark towards their car will have a feeling of unsettledness, uh, insecurity, lack of safety to some degree. And so our brains have been set up to protect ourselves in a way that is fight or flight almost. So that's the 2 million-year-old brain. You're not going to unprogram you from doing that. So you're always focusing on what's the risk? What do I if I do that? What is the fear? That's just that is just humanity. That is not there's something wrong with you. That is the entire world. And so we're always focusing on something. So the question is what are you continually focusing on? What is the thing that rolls around in your brain constantly that you find? And that's an important piece that you want to have an understanding around. If it's in your business and you're always focused on what people aren't doing versus what people are doing, then that is going to show up in a way from a leadership, problem-solving, decision-making capacity that is going to have you showing up in a way that may not be as fruitful as you would like. And then when you ask yourself, like, why are people doing this? Why are they? But the reflection comes from us. So what are we constantly focused on? What does this mean? What is the meaning that we attach to the events that occur in our lives? Is it a blessing? Is it happening to me or is it happening for me? What is that meaning that you constantly are attaching, or not constantly, but maybe consistently or habitually attach meanings to certain things? And I think, I personally ask that question very often. Is it, how is this happening for me, not to me? That's the statement that I use, or the question that I ask. How's this happening for me versus to me? Because sometimes something happens and you're like, God, man, I can't believe it. Like, what? Oh. And if you don't have a part of you that is going to stop you from being able to break that pattern, that's the pattern recognition is the important piece. Is, for me, that is one of the most significant questions that I ask is, how is this happening for me, not to me? So I'm recognizing that there's a presupposition that this could happen for me, and the upside is that it's not happening to me. Does that make sense based on what we talked about earlier on the two components of a quality question? Has to have a good presupposition and it has to have an upside. And then the third question is, what should I do about it? What should I do about it? What should I do about these things? What are my opportunities? What are my possibilities? What are my three options? So the three things that we're always constantly thinking about or focusing on is what am I focused on? What does this mean? And what should I do about it? And then I think, as a piece to this is, to number two is, I want to just help you understand that emotion is where we live. And so when you look at your life and you determine that your life is amazing and joyful, or your life is problematic and troublesome, that emotion is coming from the meaning that you attach from an event. So an event occurs, we attach a meaning. The meaning that we attach creates an emotion, right? Somebody drives into us, we get into a car accident, and right away that's the event, and we get out and we attach a meaning. And some people get out of the car and go, is everybody okay? How's it? How you doing? Everybody's okay? Okay, everybody's okay. Oh, geez, well, I guess I'm getting a new car. Or people are like, shit, whatever choice words that they love to use. They bang the steering wheel and they are instantly get out and go, you idiot, you stupid, whatever, da, 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 and they look to blame, judge, convict, before they understand all the facts. And so chances are, how the meaning that you attach has some consistency and some flow to it. And there's a pattern that you continue to repeat. And in order to change that pattern, you have to have a series of quality questions to ask yourself and start training yourself so that you can really kind of impact yourself and your environment in a different way. Here's the real downside. And so you attach a meaning, it creates an emotion, and the emotion is where you live. And I can tell you this with absolute certainty. If you have a life that is problematic and troublesome, then you can go back and reverse engineer the thinking of how you got there. And a lot of people think like, oh, I got to win $1 million, or I got to have this job, or I got to have that, or I have to have some tangible thing that makes my life better or more happy or more joyful. And the reality is that's never going to happen. I know a lot of extremely wealthy people that I've met on my travels, whether it's through the podcast or whether it's in business. And an asshole is an asshole, whether they're rich or poor. Show me a person without money that's an asshole, and when they get money, they'll still be an asshole, probably a bigger asshole. Excuse my French, but money, wealth, whatever it is that you desire, the relationship that you want with, a specific, our ideal mate, that is not going to make you a happier, more joyful person. What is going to make you a happier and more joyful person is attaching a different meaning to the events that happen in your life. People who end up getting, an undesirable outcome but have joy are people who look at it and frame it in a way that creates a meaning that, hey, this is happening for me. And so that meaning and emotion is an important factor of, how you end up translating into your life of joyfulness, happiness, wonderment, and curiosity, whatever the word is based on the meaning that you attach. So I think this is a really, really, really important piece. Like we said, there was a lot of people sending some questions about strategic thinking. There was the questions kind of circulated around things like, how do you strategically think? How do you plan? How do you manage your day-to-day life based on the vision that you want for your business? How do you get people to function in a way that allows the organization to make progress? Those were kind of, really kind of the theme of a lot of these questions. So I'm going to go through some stuff on strategic thinking and some of the things that I practice on a pretty ritualized basis. Those who work very closely to me, and there's a couple of them online, really know that I have a deep ritual of process. As a matter of fact, later on today, Tennille and I are going to be attending Date with Destiny, which is Tony Robbins' premier program. We've been to it 13 times since 2008. So I don't know how long that is. 08 to it's like, so we're better than 60-70% of the years since 2008 we've been to a Date with Destiny. And the reason why we go is we go because it's the end of the year on purpose. He schedules it at this time of the year, and we're going to do a mindset check. We're doing a calibration. We're doing a period of deep thought and thoughtfulness and looking for insights on how do we be better, how do we create and reflect on the past, how do we reflect on the past and create the future that we desire most. And so we're listening and hearing, to where the gaps are that we need to fill to live the most abundant life. And when I say abundant, I don't mean money, I mean joy. I would give up all my money for absolute, joyfulness. I think most people would, and most people will give up their money for their health. And so those are the kinds of things that we really reflect on because that's what's most important. The business side of things should be a game. I mean, it should be fun most of the time. It's not going to be fun all the time. Nothing is fun all the time. So what do I do? Yearly vision planning and goal setting. So Tennille and I do a vision board every year. I don't set goals as much as I create roadmaps now. But in the past, when I started, every year for 20 years of my life, I would go through the process of setting goals, yearly goals, quarterly goals, monthly goals, and then I would transfer those into my day timer, and I'll talk about how we do that. But I set like very specific strategic goals. I would set 10-year goals, and then I would look at them and break them down to what do I need to accomplish yearly to get to that 10-year goal. And then what do I need to do inside the quarter and inside the month? And so that was a religious process that I did for 20 years. Now I am more thinking of road mapping. I look more like 20 years out. I look for trending. I break my life down into categories: health, relationship, personal growth, business, and notice that business came to my mind fourth because it literally is not as important. The first one is my relationship. The next one is my health, and probably should be my health so that I can stay longer in my relationship. But so this is a very, very, and look, I mean, this isn't rocket science, guys. Like, it is, as much as the practice, it's the practice and the process and the ritualization of it that is more important than the actual technique of it. I would encourage people to just get out and do it. And we'll talk about how that can happen. And so we set yearly vision. So every year, Tennille and I do a vision board. And we'll do that this year. So we collect pictures and we create a montage of all these pictures of, what the year might look like and what we might capture out of the year in terms of whether it might be travel, whether it might be our health, whether it might be tangible things that we want to get, whether, business, of course. And so we do that yearly. And that happens, usually typically over the holidays. We're going to Date with Destiny. That kind of gets our mindset, configured. And so that might be for you, if you don't want to go to a date with Destiny, it might include what book do you need to read, what podcast you need to listen to, what is going to get you into the mindset of positivity, creativity, future planning, optimization or optimism in your own mind. And then when do you schedule the time to kind of lay out the yearly goals? I used to go away. This was way back in the day when I was a single guy. I would take my dog and I would go and rent a cottage in the middle of nowhere, like in the middle of winter. And I would rent a cottage that had no power. It would be, there was no TV, no radio, wood burning stove, and propane lights. Everything was run off of propane, and they had like the turn up lanterns. Like, it was literally like super, super rustic, something you'd find like right out of the movies. You'd have to walk in, and I would take, mild amounts of food, and I would go there for 2 days, and I would, with no outside influences, and I would just do my goal setting and my planning, and I'd take my dog with me, and I would just write and journal and think, and I would take books and I would read, and I would get my mind straight and get it prepared and plan out my year in advance. Then big on quarterly reviews. So every quarter, schedule in, a few hours to do a review of what you set, are you pacing towards, where are you falling behind, where are you ahead, do we need to change track a little bit, is there some optimization of looking to see where we need to go and alter course. And then one of the biggest things is weekly planning and solitude. This is something that weekly planning and solitude that I do every single week. Takes me about an hour and a half, and I do it on Sundays. I'll go to the gym, I'll come home, and I'll be eating breakfast, and I'll have a coffee, and I'll start just planning my week in advance. And so every week, my calendar gets loaded up with the big items that I want to achieve and I want to accomplish over the course of that week. How I do that is I do it based on projects that I have going on, but I also do it based on my identities. And so, this is a bit of a sideline, but I have 8 identities. I have the chairman identity, which is my business identity. I have my love slave identity, which is my husband identity. I have my outrageous father identity. I have my student identity, which is my growth learner person. I have my profit seeker identity. I have my athletic adventurer identity. So that's the athlete, the travel guy, the adventure guy. And then I don't know which ones I rhymed off. I think I missed one. It doesn't matter. There's one other one in there. So I make sure that when my calendar is done at the end of the week, that I have, and all those identities are colored. And so, like, for example, the love slave is red, the outrageous father is green. Oh, the coach, my coach identity, that's the one I missed, that's orange. My chairman's blue. So you get the idea that when I look at my Outlook calendar, that I'm looking to see, like, do I have all the things covered? Am I overweighted or underweighted? Do I need to look and say, hey, like, I need to add, and there's a lot of weeks in there where I look at it and I go, geez, there's not enough red in there. I need to commit some more time. And so, I'll create opportunities for, Tennille and I to spend time together, do a dinner, walk the dog at night for half an hour, all those kinds of things in order to take that time so that I am planning, everything in advance so that it doesn't go off the rails. And so that is a really, really probably one of the most important things that you can do. The prioritized daily task list. So I have a task list that is an ongoing task list, but I prioritize mine the way Stephen Covey teaches it, which is, I forget what his daytimer program is called, but they're prioritized A, B, and C. A being the most important priority, not urgent tasks, but most important. B, and then C, and then all the A's get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. B is the same, and C is the same. And so the most important thing on the prioritized daily task list is to make sure that you are prioritizing by priority of importance, not urgency. That's a whole nother conversation and another teaching thing that we're not going to get into today. But I think a lot of times, like, if you can get it in the task list and you're focusing on your priorities and the number one things, and those are translating into your weekly calendar, what gets scheduled is what gets done. That's just a fact. And so the other thing that I do that I believe is extremely important is think time. And I have a document that we could probably share on the website, but it's a formal think time process. I take 20 to 30 minutes a day, not every day. If you can schedule it once a week. Most people that I tell this to don't ever do it. It's very difficult. It's a very difficult process, but I sit for 20 to 30 minutes with one single question to think on. And I use my iPad with a pen, but you can use a paper and a pen. That's how I started it because I've been doing it for a very, very, very long time. And I put my pen on the paper. I write the question on the top of the piece of paper. I put my pen on the paper, and the pen never leaves the paper, ever. I never lift it off because it's a very uncomfortable feeling to leave your pen sitting on a piece of paper, even when you're not writing. So when you get to the point where, your flow gets interrupted, or the pattern gets interrupted, and your hand is still on that paper, you leave it on that paper, and eventually you train yourself it's again, thinking is a muscle. Like I said earlier in the program, is that thinking is a muscle. And if you train yourself to continually think, thinking gets easier and easier and easier. And so now my thinking is, I would say, probably one of my most powerful attributes is my ability to be able to dissect information and think about it very, very quickly. But that wasn't born that way. I mean, you're talking to a guy that I'm a college dropout. And when I was in high school, I read at about a grade 4 level. Literally, I would read a book. I can remember sitting at the kitchen table. It was the worst. Oh man, almost brings tears to my eyes, because I used to sit and read a book, and my mom was very, very strict. And I would have to read in the kitchen. I couldn't go to my room. I couldn't go downstairs. Because she knew I would just not read or fall asleep or whatever. And so she was pretty smart. So she would sit me at the kitchen table, and I would sit with my book, and I would be reading the book. And I literally can remember reading things like, the dog jumped over the ball to grab, and then I would finish the sentence and I wouldn't remember the sentence. So I'd have to go back and read the sentence again. So even to read at an average level of, what I would say is a normal person's reading level, I've taken 2 speed reading courses in order to optimize how I read and regurgitate or retain, information. And I'm still not very good at it. And that's okay. I mean, to me, I've been able to make up for that deficiency in other ways that made me stronger in other areas. And so it's not something I beat myself up over. It is just what it is. I've learned to adapt. I didn't see it as a problem. I just found a different way to move myself forward. But it is kind of handy to be able to read. I'm not going to lie. So that is a big piece. Hands down, probably one of the most powerful management business techniques that I've learned is think time. It's been unbelievably powerful. So if I could give you one gift, it would be the power of think time. Because I have developed that skill set, and I got a million examples of how that served me in ways, and how fast I think about things now is sometimes actually astonishes me, actually, because I came from a point where I couldn't read. There's 3 laws of peak performance. So I think these are pretty critical. So these 3 things are read and write your goals every single day. I can't tell you, you want to develop a ritual. Again, I'm going to keep going. There's some themes here that I've been kind of talking about, which is the rituals that we have are what going to show up every day, building those muscles, building those processes, building those rituals, and reading and writing your goals every day. If you haven't been doing that in the past, this is something that you have to start. You create your yearly goals, review them quarterly, but every single day, just read and write the 1 or 2 goals that you want to accomplish out of your day today. That is, and regurgitate what your yearly goal is, so it's always on the top of your mind, because where focus goes, energy flows. The second is plan your day before it begins. So the point of this is the big piece on the planning your day before it begins. Earlier, I said I plan my week before, planning in solitude. So I do weekly planning in solitude. And then, look, let's be realistic. Not every day goes as planned. As a matter of fact, no day goes as planned. I don't think I've ever had a day go as planned. And if I do, I go buy a lottery ticket because it just doesn't happen. But I think it's so important for us to be able to understand that the day is going to go off track. And so every single morning when we wake up, we need to, or before we go to bed, I plan my day in advance. So I go back and I look at yesterday and I say, what happened yesterday? What didn't get done? What did I have to move? What did I have to shuffle? And what am I going to have to move and shuffle today? So that when I start my day, I have a plan rather than showing up and figuring out what's going to happen, because there's no ritualization in that. And there's no pattern recognition in it, because you're always developing. When people go, oh man, my days are chaos, da da da. Well, no shit, they're chaos. You didn't plan. And then if all of a sudden you plan, but you walk into chaos and your day turns into chaos, well, then all of a sudden that's an indication that there's some training that needs to be done. There's some standard operating procedures that need to be created. There's some coaching that needs to be invoked in order to be able to get your people to do and execute on the things that they need to execute on. And that typically happens around training. So this is a great key for us to be able to start to see some of the things that are going wrong in our business, to be able to adjust and modify for improvement. And then the third one is create accountability in your life. Who are you accountable to? How are you accountable? When you own a business, or if you're a leader in a business, a lot of times accountability happens, we believe it happens below the level of where we're at. And then who do we become accountable to? And if you're a leader in a business, a lot of times, there's not a micromanaging processes. There's not enough accountability on us as a business owner. Like, who am I accountable to? So I learned very early on, I have a mastermind group that I have a call with every 6 weeks. And I set goals. I share with them my goals, and every 6 weeks, I have to lever up my accountability towards what it is that I am really showing up and accomplishing every 6 weeks. I also have, or had in the past, I don't have one right now, but a board of directors for my businesses, so that when I show up, I've got every quarter, I would have to report to my board of directors what is happening on the business. So we would go through all the financials, we go through all the goal setting, we go through all the outcomes, we go through all the leadership, all the training, the org charts, everything. And I would, have that responsibility put on me. I have a philosophy, it's called You Inc., or you could call it Me Inc. But at the end of every day, I ask myself the question, would I get fired or would I get a raise today? And it helps me kind of look at my daily performance to decide, did I do everything that I could do? And are there opportunities for me to make progress in a way that impacts the teams, the results, the outcomes of the business on a day-to-day basis? And I also do it in my personal life. I do it in my relationship. It's like I'm constantly asking and making sure, like, hey, am I doing everything to make my wife happy? What else could I do? If I did one thing different, what would it be in order to elevate her joyfulness, her happiness, her peace of mind, reduce her stress? Those are the kinds of questions that I ask myself in the You Inc. identity or profile that I create. So, this whole piece of accountability is extremely important. In the green here, this was a question that I thought was really interesting. Functioning in fast-moving environments and competitive industries. I forget what the exact question was, but the premise was, how do we function in these fast-moving environments? And to me, I think there's 3 sustainable business success tools. The 3 keys of sustainable business success are: number 1, financial skills; number 2, business skills; and number 3, leadership skills. To me, this is our obligation, our commitment, not only to the business, but to our people, to our teams, and to ourselves, on where we need to grow. How are we growing our financial skills? How are we growing our business skills? How are we growing our leadership skills? So the business skills, if you're asking like, well, what business skills, they might be sales, they might be customer service, they might be SOPs, they might be processes, they might be anything inside your business that could be asset management, it could be equipment, it could be anything that functions inside the operations of your business. And so heightening your business skills, your acumen towards all those things is extremely important. But at the end of the day, what it really, really, really comes down to is this, do you have a student/growth identity or mindset? What does that look like? A question that you might ask to develop that, if it's not at the level that you want it to be, upon my death or my final day, what would I want people to say? What would I want my wife to say? So for my love slave identity, it's what would I want her to say at my funeral or the eulogy? As a business person, from when it comes to my student and growth identity, is what do I want people to say about that? What would the words be that they would utter on that final day in regards to who that person is? And this is very critical because what I mentioned, our 2 million-year-old brain wants to keep us in this field of certainty. We are built to kind of want certainty, to really understand the environment, to not have anything, that's going to come out of the bush and attack us. And so the more certain that we can create our environment, it allows us to function and make decisions and navigate the world that we're in much more comfortably and much more easy. But so we're programmed for certainty. But the problem is all growth happens outside of your comfort zone, happens outside the circle of certainty and in the area and realm of uncertainty. And so if you feel like you are struggling from a growth perspective, you may need to spend some time in this area of your life. I know I did, that's for sure. So in going back to the question, functioning in fast-moving environments, what do we do? We focus on those three areas, those three key elements of success. But one of the other things that we do is we shrink down the review cadence. Whether it's reviewing the processes in our business, whether it's sales, whether it's technology, we kind of have to crunch down and have more optics faster, more frequently, with more conversation, more intensity, more direction and purposefulness. So that, I think, is an extremely key, important piece to making sure that we're on top of it faster and quicker, because the environment's changing so often and so quickly. And that is like one of the reasons why I wanted to bring attention to this specific question, because there was 2 or 3 questions that kind of were in this realm. And with AI coming on, I think like one of the other questions in the book that I'm not going to probably really get to is, what is my greatest fear for the future? And my greatest fear for the future as a entrepreneur and as a podcaster and a provider of information and coaching and training is that AI is coming. It's going to come quickly. I don't think anybody really has an understanding of how it's going to come and reveal itself, but there's a lot of consensus that it's going to happen quickly. And my fear is that people are going to be very unprepared. And so I wanted to make sure that we tackle this conversation. But so shrinking and reviewing any of the inputs to our business, we have to improve that and make that cadence quicker. We have to create high performance teams. If you're in a very fast moving or competitive environment, the more competitive and high performing your team is, the better they're going to be equipped to be able to handle that. And so that may look like having to top grade more, A lot of times, and this may not be popular, it may be a little bit controversial, but at the end of the day, it's also not necessarily who you hire, but it is sometimes who you fire. And you have to be very cognizant of the, especially in a high moving environment, you cannot afford to have people asleep at the wheel. It is very difficult to play in a gladiator arena, being high competition and high velocity environment with people asleep at the wheel. And so, I think it's really, really important that we hire hard and fire fast, and make sure that we have the right people on the team doing the right things, rather than waiting and delaying and hoping and praying that this person is going to come around. I mean, I think you also have to have metrics in order for them to achieve and work towards, but I also think you need to have ongoing coaching. There's a lot of things in here that I'm leaving out of the conversation, but I just think it's really important to create high performance teams. I think also you have to have a North Star focus. When you're in a high performing team environment with a high velocity and high competition, vision, mission, and values is where all decisions get formed. And if people understand what the vision is, what the mission is, and what the vision is, then they will put their best foot forward to it. But if they don't understand that, then you're going to have a very tough time keeping up in those kind of environments. I think the other piece too is scorecards. Scorecards are critical. Where are you scoring your business? How do you know? I mean, the importance of scorecards is this. You got to know the difference between the winners and the losers. And how are you performing, so that at halftime, you can look up at the scoreboard and go, how am I going to play the second half? The question isn't how do I win this game? The question is, how do I play the second half of this game, or the second quarter, or the third quarter, or the fourth quarter, or the next roll? What does it look like? And you got to have scoreboards to know that. And some of these scorecards, there's financial scorecards, there's customer service scorecards, there's team member scorecards, there's operations scorecards, sales scorecards, training scorecards. All these areas inside the business have to be tied to a scorecard so that you know exactly where you are. And if you're not in a very fast moving environment, maybe you can get away with it. I mean, you're not going to get away with it for a super long time, but this stuff is very, very, very critical. And I think then the other piece too is increase your communication. How do we increase constantly the communication that we need to have with our people so that they have an understanding of where are we, where do we need to be, and what do we need to do to get there? And so that cadence of communication is critical. And how do you do it right now in your business? How are you communicating with your people? What does that look like? Is it random? Is it based on problems? Is it problem driven, or is it progress driven? And if it's progress driven, you have some type of cadence, whether there's weekly operations meetings, weekly training, daily training, monthly training, that all depends on your business. It's all variable, but the touch points are critical inside the business. And if you don't have those planned out and you don't have a cadence, then they're probably reactive, not proactive. That basically, concludes kind of the content of the program. I'll extend on for another, 5-10 minutes, answer any questions that people might have. Happy to answer anything if there is. So a question just came in about technology. With the rapid change in technology, what are some of the things that we're doing? This is one of my concerns. And for those of the people who work closest, like in our C-suite, they see this constantly. I've had a think tank for about 6 or 7 years now on technology, because it's not this is not new. The advent of technology, eVTOLs, AI, electric vehicles. We've known that we've been moving towards a technological revolution for decades, and it just kind of moved what seemed to be very slowly. But in the last, since I'd say 2023, with the real insurgence of AI and the implementation of useful AI at a day-to-day basis, we have had we spend a lot of time. So a couple of the specific things that we're doing is we are creating way more SOPs in all of our businesses than what we had before. A lot of times I would say we were negligent in having specific curated SOPs. They were kind of the way we do business, and they were often unspoken, and they would be transferred into, from, training and observation and daily work ethic or work habits. And now we are getting extremely focused on putting everything into an SOP, because AI will use SOPs to be able to make decisions and create activity, and the workflow agents that will be created and are being created through AI are all coming from a platform of, drop in as much information into AI that is executable, which is an SOP. This happens, this happens, this happens, and if this happens, we do this, or if this happens, we do that. And we drop that into AI. And we're also now dropping in sales conversations, quotes, training, optimization of anything that we do is now moving towards an AI implementation. And so in every single one of our businesses, we have a ChatGPT team program where it's not accessible from the internet, so nobody can access our information, and we just keep dumping more and more and more information, because in the next couple of years we'll be at the level where we have a Jarvis in our ear from that movie Iron Man, where we'll be able to access that and say, hey Jarvis, this is happening right now, what would be the next steps? Or our staff will be able to ask that of the company Jarvis, if you will, or the company trainer. So that it's like, oh, I need to, know what's the SOP on building this wall or serving this product, or how do what should this email look like that I have to send out to a customer? And AI is already creating emails. That's a no brainer, but they'll be able to do a lot more based on the SOPs. So that's what we're doing.
So next question, if you have a daily plan, which always gets shuffled, would you put everything missed from the day that you're on into the following day, or split it over the rest of the week, as each day always has something that gets put off due to unforeseen circumstances?
Yeah, that's a great question. Here's what I do. What I do is, I talked about my ABCs and my 1, 2, 3s. And so when I have tasks that continue to reoccur, and so what gets pushed off is all the stuff, the little shit usually gets pushed off. So if it's little stuff, they start to fall down in priority, because they have, I don't know about you guys, but a lot of times, like, I'll come up with an idea. Hey, we should do this. And it sounds like the greatest idea since sliced bread, that this has to happen in our business. We got to execute this stuff. And then you put it on a task list. Ideally, you put it on a task list. Maybe you put it on a calendar and you commit time to it. If it's worthy on your task list and it takes more than 15 minutes, it should find time in your daily calendar. If it's not worthy, then what you'll find is if you prioritize ABCs, those reoccurring items will start to fall to the bottom of the list. And look, it's okay to have stuff at the bottom of the list, and it could sit there for a month or it could sit there for 2 months. And there's a couple of techniques you can use. You can use a secondary list that you review monthly, where you want to move into your daily active task list. So if those things are continuing to reoccur, you can move them right off your task list so you don't see them anymore and they don't occupy your energy and your focus. And then a lot of times what I do is at the end of my week during my planning and solitude, I will go through these things that tend to be reoccurring, and I look at two things. I look at, number one, is this actually worthy of me doing, or should I delegate the task? Because the reality is sometimes we're the roadblock. And we have a tendency as leaders to bring too much on ourselves and not delegate enough. So those things show up, and it's a very good indication of maybe I need to be better at delegating as a leader. And then the other thing is maybe it wasn't such a great idea that I thought it was 2 weeks ago, and I should just delete it off my task list. And oftentimes I will delete it off my task list. And then if it comes back, this is the question I always say to myself, is when I delete something off because I feel like, I shouldn't delete it, I got to hold on to it, I committed to it, whatever bullshit story you create in your life, and you're holding on to this task. But if I delete it off the task list and it reappears because somebody brought it up or the problem arose again, then I know that it's worthy of my time. So oftentimes I will just take the courage, if I use that word, to get it right off my task list, so I'm not thinking about it and it's not occupying my time. There's nothing wrong with being very selective of where you spend your time. I hope that answered your question.
In the past, I've heard you speak about gamifying the sales activity to meet goals and perhaps overcome fears or stories that we tell ourselves. Can you frame how you would gamify sales activities? And the second part to that is, can you share your thoughts on morning rituals and how people can get themselves ready to crush their day?
Okay, so for the first question on gamification, the first thing I would say is I got this from my first interview with Heather Moyse. I think it was my first interview, but maybe it was the second. So for those of you who listen to the podcast, go back and because I think this is a really good point. Thank you, Ray, for asking. But Heather Moyse was the first person that really brought that to light. I had heard about it, but she made it make a lot of sense to me the way she described it when it comes to gamification. But gamifying, look, it doesn't even have to be the sales process. It could be on your operations side. But the question then really is, or the answer, or part of the answer is like, how do I make this fun? Like gamification is making it fun. So how do we build a process where we are rewarding on a consistent basis, whether it's, fun scorecards, gaming, like think about like rewards points for customer service. That's gamification is all it is. So how do you kind of bring the fun? I think like really we use these buzzwords, but how are we bringing the fun back into the process of sales? How are we using healthy competition that makes everybody feel good, feel fun, they're getting rewarded? And ultimately, I think the core to all of this is how do you reward the behavior that you're looking to get? And so it's like when you are looking at gamification, the question I would be asking is, what's my outcome for gamification? What am I really trying to achieve by making this, by providing this gamification, if you will, or this fun factor, and creating that is like, what's the outcome for the people? What's the outcome for the business? What's the outcome for the leadership team? To be very specific and very clear on the vision that you have for what you're desiring most. And then once you have that vision, once you have that outcome and it's extremely clear, then you say, well, what are the, then you create a question, which is, in order for me to achieve this outcome, what would be the 5 ways that we could play, have fun, enjoy, compete to get this outcome, and how would we reward that behavior? The foundation of my morning ritual is like, look, I get up in the morning, and the first thing that I do 20 minutes every single morning is my wife gets a massage in bed, and we sit and we oftentimes we don't even talk. It's just like I'm just pouring my love into her. That's a ritual that we created because it is the foundation for my entire life. Like when I look at my life, everybody goes, well, how do you balance the things? It's like, there is no balance. I don't believe in balance. I believe in prioritization. And, how I prioritize my life, I look at it like a Christmas tree. My wife is the trunk of the Christmas tree, and everything else in my life adorns that. The leaves, the ornaments, the lights, the trickery, the fun, the whatever that is, it is to adorn her. And so every single morning I wake up and I project my love for my wife, because it's the single most important thing. So what I guess really, as I say that, it's, what is the most important thing in your life, and make that your first priority of your day. Because if your first thing that you do is your ultimate passion, then make that so. So if somebody's passion is music, then wake up in the morning and play music for 15 minutes. If it's sports, go find a sport that you can play first thing in the morning. And then, so that's the first thing, is like waking up and prioritizing the most important thing in your life. And I'm not here to tell you what that should be. For me, it's very clear what it is for me. The next thing I would say is like breathing, physiology. Motion is emotion. And so if you're getting up and you're, moving slowly to the counter and pouring yourself a coffee, and but if that's your thing and that's your passion, if reading's your passion, then get up and do that. But then second, get up and start moving. Get your day started moving with intensity, with passion, with purposefulness, whether that's walking your dog, whether that's going for a run, whether it's going for the gym, whether it's playing a sport, whatever that is. And then, I am a big believer in music. Being able to music is the source to the soul. And so music can, get you moving and get you pumped up. And it's really about finding the rituals that work for you best. And so hopefully that quickly helps a little bit.
You mentioned your shift away from goals to road mapping. Curious to know what prompted that change after what I would imagine was a successful process, and how you positively benefited from it.
So yeah, that was, thanks for the question, D-Dubs. So the where that happened for me was, I have been known to be a bit aggressive. So what I found was I used to get very attached and tied to the goals that I would set, and my intensity really rose from it. And I don't know if that was me showing up with intensity was never an issue for me. Oftentimes it was an issue for other people. And so I recognized there was an opportunity that in my life, I was always pushing towards something. And as I started to do more mindfulness work and more releasing of my ego and control, I started to understand more about setting intentions and allowing the universe to provide what I desire by putting it out into the world. And so it was really more of a push versus push-pull thing. I always felt like I was pushing towards something, and it was aggressive and it was intense. And then through mindfulness, I just now start, I believe, I have a completely different belief that I allow things to enter my life. But I will add in there that you have to be very careful on what it is that you allow into your life, meaning, the proximity of the right people in your life being brought to you. You have to manage that as well. So that's where it came from for me.
With respect to the three levels of a problem, many can become internal, leading to psychological. Can you describe how to reach one, external, where I'd reasonably assume is the best position in terms of making rational and logical decisions for a particular problem?
Yeah. So yes and no. So the question was, in the three levels of of a problem, the hallucination was that how do we move from the physiological meaning slash justice to making it an external, uh, um, it is a better place to handle a problem. So yes and so I don't like to say that there's this one thing is better than another thing. I think this is more of an identification piece, where, you know, identifying where the problem is coming from and then saying, oh, to be expected, right? It's like, if the problem is internal, it is not my goal to move it to an external. I don't need to necessarily move it. What I need to do is accept it. What I need to do is identify and be aware that, oh, this is a problem and I'm feeling it internally and emotionally. And then the question is how do I deal with it when it's an emotional problem? For me, I do a lot of meditation work with, the app is called the Waking Up app, but identifying, that there's an emotion and being able to see, that's interesting. I'm feeling upset about this, or I'm feeling angry, or I'm feeling frustrated. But once we are aware of it and we understand it, then it's just a matter of kind of letting it pass by, just like thoughts come in and out of our mind. So that really is, this is more of an awareness piece of where this is coming from. So it's okay for it to be a philosophical problem, because sometimes that's where the greater the intensity of the meaning or the emotion, the better or more intensity we approach to a solution. So it's not that I want to move it from one place to the next, or that external is better and internal is worse, or philosophical is even worse. It's just an identification piece to understand, so that once we have awareness, then we can go, to be expected. It's like the saying, know thyself, right? Once you know where this is coming from, you're better equipped to be able to address it, handle it, and create a strategy around it. Highly recommend that app for people. If affordability is a problem, you can reach out to them and they will actually gift it to you. But I don't know what it costs, but it's been unbelievably foundationally changing for me. And I used to meditate. Like anything in my life, I have a pattern that I follow, that when I find something that works for me, I'll try it. If it works for me, then I do an immersion with it. I do it every day, sometimes multiple times a day. I build the muscle, I crank it out over and over and over again. I build the rituals and I create that muscle. And then that allows me to access that resource at any time. So now I don't necessarily meditate every single day. I probably do it maybe 3 days a week. Right now, actually, I feel in my life I probably could amp that up a little bit for a little while. And now I do it as I need it. But anyways, I hope that helps.
So many of these things made me think back to vulnerability. Do you think that being vulnerable with yourself and others is a key starting point for making better decisions and creating real accountability in your life?
So number one, yes. I think I'm going to say there's three pieces. Number one, there's awareness. There's awareness to, being open to being wrong. We have a tendency as humans to want to be right. It feeds our significance. It feeds our love. It feeds our certainty. And so being right is something that we kind of crave. And so having awareness about the possibility or the option that maybe being right is not necessarily required. So first is awareness. Second, I think, is vulnerability. You've got to be vulnerable and open to accepting change within yourself. And then I think the third piece to this, which for me was the biggest piece, which was forgiveness. Or I will actually refer to it as self-love. I spent way too many years beating the shit out of myself for who I wasn't or what I wasn't, or what I had done in the past that was not congruent with how I wanted to see myself in the world. And I didn't have a lot of self-love. And so I had to learn to be able to accept myself, accept my flaws, and to love myself. And then that led to a whole different level of joyfulness so that I can laugh at myself. And so, sometimes in the moments, we get angry and upset. And in that moment, that's how it comes out. But afterwards, being able to forgive yourself for that and actually laugh at yourself and go, man, what a kook I was. Being able to identify and see that gives a level of grace for yourself. I'm going to take one more question and then we got to wrap. And if there is no more questions, that's okay too. There's no more questions on the chat. Amazing. Well, thank you very much, guys, for all the questions. Thank you for your time. We appreciate it. We would love any feedback. Mostly I want criticism, to be honest. I'm going to ask for criticism. I know that, it's like, you're supposed to sandwich shit. It's okay. I got big shoulders. I really would love the positive feedback. Thank you guys for, any patience with any of the technological gaps that we've had. And we appreciate your time. We appreciate your commitment. And if there's anything that we can do for you or you want any clarification, I'm happy to provide that. Again, I'm super grateful and super humble for the time that you spent with us here today. Guys, God bless. Thank you very much. And we'll see you soon. Thanks for listening. I appreciate you being with us. If you found value in the show and know a friend or a coworker who could benefit from the conversation, please share the link via text or on social media. Remember, each share creates a ripple effect of knowledge and inspiration. We'll see you next week.
The views, information, or opinions expressed by guests during the Dwayne Kerrigan podcast are solely those of the individuals involved and do not necessarily represent those of Dwayne Kerrigan and his affiliates. Dwayne Kerrigan or the Dwayne Kerrigan podcast is not responsible for and does not verify the accuracy of any of the information contained in the podcast series. The primary purpose of this podcast is to educate and inform. Listeners are advised to consult with a qualified professional or specialist before making any decisions based on the content of this podcast.